In the fabrication room, a team of workers breaks the carcasses down into primal and subprimal cuts. Beef carcasses are broken into 4 major primal cuts and 3 minor cuts. The major cuts are the chuck, rib, loin, and round. These primal cuts are known as the 4 lean cuts. The other primal cuts are the foreshank and brisket, the plate, and the flank. With the exception of the brisket and a few individual muscles, these cuts are boned, excess fat removed, and the lean trim ground into ground beef. The chuck produces such cuts as chuck roasts, 7-bone roasts, and arm roasts. Popular cuts like ribeye steaks and prime rib are cut from the rib. The loin can be cut into several popular cuts including T-bone steaks, loin strip steaks, porterhouse steaks, filet mignon, and sirloin steaks. And the round yields cuts like round steaks, rump roasts, top round steaks, and eye of round steaks. When the carcasses arrive in fab, they are weighed to determine the cold carcass weight. The cold carcass weight is compared to hot carcass weight to figure cooler shrink. The carcasses are first trimmed to remove excess fat. The knife used here is called a whizzard knife. The whizzard knife has a single circular blade driven by an electric motor. Whizzard knives are fast and easy to use, but as with any knife, care must be taken to prevent accidental injuries. Next, the carcasses move to the breaking area where the initial breaking cuts are made. First, a worker uses a long knife to cut between the 5th and 6th ribs. This cut separates the chuck from the rib. Then, another worker using an air-powered saw cuts through the backbone, through the ribs to separate the chuck from the brisket, and through the sternum to separate the brisket from the plate. When the carcasses leave the breaking area, the chuck and brisket are hanging from the rest of the carcass, held only by a portion of the brisket muscle. As the carcasses reach the chuck line, a worker attaches the foreshank to a second rail using a scissor clamp. The tissue connecting the chuck and brisket to the plate is cut, and the chuck portion is separated. Next, the brisket is removed and sent down the brisket boning and trimming line. With a series of careful, artful cuts, the clod and top blade are removed. This is a very difficult job because of the unusual shape of the blade bone itself. Next, the blade bone is removed with the help of a power-assisted blade puller. Then the chuck tender is removed. The chuck is then placed onto a bandsaw and cut into 2 pieces, the blade portion and the arm portion. Boning the blade portion requires perhaps the most skilled workers in the plant. Because of the number of bones and their unusual shapes, much skill and practice are required to be able to efficiently remove the neck bones and backbone. After the chuck is removed, the remainder of the carcass moves to the rib line. First, the skirt muscles are removed. Then the combined rib and plate are dropped onto a bandsaw where the saw operator separates the rib from the plate. Next, the chine bone is cut off of the rib to make it easier to remove the bones. Once the chine bones are removed, it's much easier to remove the rib bones and the feather bones. The plate is boned and used primarily in ground beef. 2 popular cuts that come from the plate are the skirt steaks, which are used to make fajitas, and short ribs. At this point, the forequarter has been removed, and the hindquarter moves down to the loin line. Here, the loin is separated from the round on a bandsaw, and the loin is sent down the loin table, while the round proceeds to the round line. The loin may be sold whole or may be cut into several different subprimal cuts. The short loin, strip loin, tenderloin, top sirloin butt, and bottom sirloin butt are just a few. The boneless loin is prepared by first removing the tenderloin. Then the chine bone is removed from the short loin, and the bones are removed from the short loin to make the loin strip. The sirloin is divided into the top and bottom butts. Then the bones are removed from the top butt to make the sirloin strip. The cuts from the loin are usually the most expensive because of the tenderness and palatability of the muscles in the loin. The last table on the disassembly line is the round table. More often than not, the round is packed and sold boneless, but some rounds are still sold bone-in to retailers who cut round steaks. The round is usually cut into 3 boneless pieces: the inside round, the gooseneck, and the knuckle. The boning process takes place while the round is still on the rail. Workers use sharp knives, experience, and gravity to help with the boning. First, the knuckle is removed. Then the inside round is removed. And finally, the gooseneck is removed. When the workers are finished, only the bones and shank meat remain. The shank meat is removed on the boning line and usually used in ground beef. As the cuts move down each table, workers remove excess fat and remaining bone pieces and perform any other cutting or trimming to make the products meet specifications. At the end of each table, quality assurance workers check each cut and, on a random basis, closely inspect several cuts to make sure the cuts meet strict standards. If for any reason a cut does not meet the specs, it is sent back to be reworked. If the problem is severe, the QA worker has the authority to stop the line completely or to make any changes necessary to solve the problem.